Here's something that's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people potentially listening to this. If you're out there, you're in part of a business and you're doing a lot of different things, trying to drive your company where you want to go. I want to know if I were to call three random people on your team right now, not your best salesperson, not you, obviously, just three random people, employees that were there, and I were to ask them, hey, what makes your company different from your competitors? The question I have is, would I get the same answer? Now, I've asked this to many different businesses, to many people with inside those businesses. And just so you know, 90% of the time, probably even a little bit higher than that, when I ask the three people, guess what? I get three complete different answers. And sometimes what I would say is wildly different answers when I ask this. It was part of my case as well back in the day. And this is one thing we're going to take a look at. So this is not from businesses that I'd like to say are broken. These are from successful companies, successful entrepreneurs, successful teams as they move forward, groups that are generating, have great products, great services, and are doing fairly well. But this is an interesting one. Nobody can actually explain what they actually do in the same way more than once. And so that's what we're going to dive into a little bit. And part of what this is looking at decoding part of the first strand of your DNA, which has to do with clarity. And with this, I'm going to bring in with me here today, Mushka. Hi, Mushka.
Hello, Nathan. Welcome back to the Thriving Hour. I'm Mushka, and we have our very own Nathan from ThriveWorks 360 with us. Nathan, that cold open that you did, I'm not gonna lie, it hit closer to home than I'd like to talk about. Before we get into this, I'm super excited that we're talking about this today. Before we get into this, let's talk about you a little bit. Who are you, and why should people listen to you? I know who you are, and why should we listen to you? But I'd want people to know about it as well.
Hey, thanks for asking. Just the short version. I spent 14 years taking and building a business to $10 million. And again, 14 years. Some people are like, woo, that's great. I felt like it was like pushing a boulder up a hill. One of the key things is I figured out a couple key things, Mushka. And that's when I went from 10 million to 30 million in just under 3 years. And so what changed? It wasn't the market. It wasn't the product that I was dealing with. It wasn't even the team that I had at all, really. These weren't the changes. What changed is that I actually finally understood how to decode what actually worked in the businesses that you could do to replicate this. And so it was a systematic process, and I'm going to refer to that as part of decoding your DNA. So now I work with different businesses, owners who've either acquired a business or have built one themselves, and they're feeling stuck. They're feeling like they know that there's more potential available in their business. So usually somewhere between $1 and $10 million. They've got great products. They've got an amazing set of customers that love what they do, but something's just not clicking quite right. 9 out of 10 times, the problem isn't actually what they think it is.
Okay, so when you opened, this whole conversation, you said that you called three random employees from a company. Did you actually do that? Like, did you actually literally picked up the phone, dial the number and call them?
I love you asking that question, because think about that. The answer is going to be yes, but there's even yes more directly. Think about this sitting around a boardroom or in a conference room when you end up with different team members and you start asking that same question. Man, does that not put the owner on the spot? I'll tell you, or every team member, they're all kind of looking back and forth trying to answer. So yeah, in part of what that is, the answer is yes. It's been done in me sitting across. It's been done through calls. It's been done in workshops. As I've asked those founders, hey, what makes you different? I then ask the head of their sales team or ask somebody else who's over operations. And again, in general, I just almost always never get the same answer. And the founder says something like, well, it's a break maybe in the quality of the relationships, or the salesperson will state it's, well, we're working on this, or we maybe know we need to get to our vision, mission, or value. So everybody has a little bit of a different reason on why they're maybe not as synced as they should be. And they can say maybe it's processes, technology, et cetera. We know that that's not the case. Three people who work together every single day. You think about this, three totally different stories come from that. What the company actually does, that leaves a big question mark on, what is it that they really do? And what can we do to
And
take a look at that?
and that's a problem because
Well, good question. Why might that be a problem if we end up with three different answers from three different of your team members? Because your customers, guess what? They're getting the same different stories too. And that's where this really gets to be. My other question is, does this mean that the website has a different story? Does this mean that the sales team has a different story? Does this mean that the marketing efforts or whatever you're doing on paid ads presents a different story? What ends up happening is, we have a happy customer that you're talking to and you're wanting them to refer a friend, and you're like, hey, what is it that you bought into, or what is it that this company does? And again, they try to think, and what we end up doing is we end up getting partial stories or partial answers. I like to refer to this, Mushka, this challenge that exists with businesses as message mayhem. So it's a little
Hmm.
bit of the chaos that comes around the broken message or the varied messages that a lot more of us have than we even think about us. So it's a lot more common than people actually realize this is in businesses.
Okay, so message mayhem. I would want to dig into this because I feel that a lot of people hearing us would recognize themselves here. What are the day-to-day symptoms, or what is it that people can recognize that they might be going through a message mayhem situation?
It's a great question. So again, what might this do, or what might this lead to in a business? Well, here's what I see over and over again. If you think about this and you were to talk about your prospect, and again, depending on how simple or how complex your service, your business, or what you're trying to do to help your ideal client out, uh, when you're done talking to them, what we end up with is, if there's one person in the room, you might think about this, it might be translated a little bit easier. But what often happens is somebody leaves the room, and because we had so much or a variation between myself and the sales rep and or what they're seeing on the site, what we find out is they kind of ask this question. So kind of like, remind me, what was it exactly again that we were getting into, or exactly what was maybe the result, or ideally, what is that exactly that they're going to help me out with? And so this is probably happened where, when you're done explaining something, now share that with me one more time. Like, help me come up to speed a little bit more. So what ends up happening is you end up with people and processes, your potential clients, seeing things differently. And at the end, what makes the difference is having a very clear message, not just in your head, but somehow it needs to be where everybody else can receive and hear that same message. And so one of the things that's worse, that's one of the biggest challenges, is I know that has been for me, and this was the case when I was looking at scaling the businesses that I've worked with in the past, is often it landed and laid in my head, and I had not done a good enough job at working on getting that out for the entire team. And so what ended up happening is I was kind of the only one who really got that, and that leads to a set of other challenges as well.
Oh, okay. So when this happens, when business owner realizes that there is this messaging problem or messaging mayhem going on all over the place, uh, what are the things they might use to try to fix it?
Well, if you think about this, if I was in the room, and if you're an entrepreneur or you're a person out there that's trying to drive success, you could often say, and we've heard this, is maybe somebody else just can't do it as good as me. And sometimes it's like, I've been around the industry, or I tend to know more. Maybe you've had more calls, maybe you've been across from more clients. But what ends up happening is the conversion of your ability to close sales is dropping. The ability to sell the product drops if you're not in the room. And so what happens is you feel like you can close the deal, but the challenge is your team can't seem like that, or the context around it. That might even be what's posted on a website. That might be what you're doing in socials. It might be what your marketing team's trying to convey. Those just never work as well as what you yourself can do. And it's not because they're not good at what they do. It's because they actually don't understand with clarity what they're trying to sell. And this really happens at all levels. It's not just at the top. This kind of goes through the entire business. So you become the bottleneck, in essence, as part of the business, because you're the best salesperson, you're the best closer, you're the one who can best connect with your ideal or best client. And that becomes a challenge. And so you become the only one who is, or you become the most valuable person. And message mayhem is a sign that that's partly true as well.
So that's a pretty vicious cycle. So it keeps coming back, right?
Yeah, it does. Keeps on coming back. Maybe I could say that one of the challenges that people have is they might not know this exists. And so what they do is they blame the marketing, right? They look at trying to improve their website. They improve the copy. They might improve a script. They look to hire other people to help them solve this problem. If you think about this, Mushko, a lot of companies that are trying to grow know that there's these other growth engines like paid ads. And what ends up happening is they think that there are pieces of their puzzle that are actually missing. And instead of those pieces being missing, and no matter what you do, because the messaging isn't as clear as it needs to be, and because that hasn't been extracted as far as ideally what this business does amazingly well, what happens is anything that you try that you add onto that ends up just not working the same. So some of those work for a while. You get little bits of bumps and you feel like you've might been able to move forward, but 3 months later, what you're finding is you're back kind of what we can say back into the fog. The employees are improvising again. What you're finding is that the message has again drifted, and you're just wondering if you need to rework. Did what we just do for the marketing team not work? Is what we just did in the messaging on the site, did it work? Is there something missing on what we're now trying to do with paid ads? And again, this is usually that same thing that happens kind of over and over and over.
Uh, what I'm understanding is that this is not a marketing problem. This is something else. Can you clarify that? Because I thought it would be a marketing problem if, the messaging is not correct.
Great question. So just the simple thing that kind of causes this to kind of, you can kind of almost say like whiplash that kind of keeps bringing this back and back into a business is it's because you can never really, what I like to say, outmarket an unclear position. So you can't
What
take
do you
something
mean
that's
by
unclear
that?
and solve that. So say that again.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain this further?
Yeah. Like, so example, when your position's fuzzy, and here's the challenge is what is fuzzy will be different for different other people. But most often a way I would use and clarify fuzzy is that you're probably just trying a lot of different things. You're maybe trying a lot of different angles because there isn't one thing that you can bring it back to. And ideally when it looks at what you do best, most often we've never documented that. And so things
Mhm.
are hit or miss. And so what ends up happening is because we're hit or miss, when we try to market, we end up with that marketing not working as well as it should because it amplifies whatever the foggy message is. So what we end up with is we think that we're going to go down a path 2, 3, 4, 5, and we go to try to state that somewhere, and all we do is amplify the mismatched message in general. So you're not turning up the signal on what works best. You're just simply turning up the signal on several things, and you're not sure if any one of them are going to work the way that they should be. So it's like on a radio, you just go turn to a station without being on a station that you can enjoy by turning it up louder. You're going across and you're finding static, and you're turning it up. We don't want to turn up the volume on static. We want to turn the volume up on the clear station that you're trying to tune into.
I believe that this is somehow related to DNA, right? Your DNA framework. And let's get into this. Number one, I would want to understand how does this message mayhem actually cost a business? And what is this DNA framework about with respect to message mayhem?
Thank you for asking that. This would be what I refer to as a DNA problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So part of that's decoding part of what your business DNA is. So let me explain a little bit because this is the thing that legitimately changed things for me forever. When I had done, again, so whether you've bought a business or if you started a business or you've been in business for a while, you feel like you've got the structure. Okay. You've got the products, you have customers, often part of a team, right? And you probably have processes. And when somebody's acquired a business, this is usually the case is you kind of go do some pre-work on some things to make sure what you're getting into is correct or is structured the right way, or you're confident about what that is. But here's the challenge is even though those things might exist, what you're not getting or most likely what you've never decoded was just simply the DNA. And what is this? We'll talk about that in here in just a minute. But the previous owner was clear about what made them different, right? Or this business was. They lived this in their head. It was sometimes instinctually part of what they were. And so they knew what type of opportunities they should chase or should not chase. They knew which ones to let go. And they probably most likely also understood if you guys ever had this, like a bad customer, a customer, you're like, man, they are just taking all of my time. So they also understood how to ignore that. And what happens is when that owner, if you're an acquired a business, that's walked out the door. If you are part of a business and you feel like you have amazing products and people tell you, the reason it probably isn't building as fast or feels more difficult is because you haven't taken the time, again, to truly define and decode the DNA on the key pieces that are most impactful. So, again, those can be some of the things that you've had the same problem. You've looked at different angles. And the challenge that you and I talk about here is there's a lack of clarity. And it's because a lot of this is trapped in your head and it's never been extracted in a way that allows it to easily be replicated for other people. And so usually this is not a communication problem. Okay. This isn't a marketing problem. And it's not even really dealing with your team because often we're like, maybe my team's not doing or they're not good enough. Again, this is really, I just call this incomplete DNA in simple. So specifically incomplete DNA, this is part of the first strand, which is clarity. And when you don't have complete clarity, on this part of your DNA. It's the first strand again. And we think this is one of the beginning phases to help people understand, in essence, their business's genetic code.
Okay, I love this. This sounds really interesting. I think you're onto something. I'd want to understand the DNA framework more. But first, can you put some numbers to this? So, you know that my mind works in stats. So, if you could put some numbers into this, and I would actually want to understand, how does this message mayhem costs a business?
Thanks for asking that. Let me have everybody who might be still sticking with us as we're going through this. I'm going to give you some hard numbers for you to think about. So let's do some math about what the impact can be, right? So you think about them when a prospect doesn't fully understand what makes you different. Okay, think about that. What makes you different? Then what they tend to do, if you think they tend to default to the only comparisons they can make. And generally, with most businesses, products and services, if you think about that, it's the price shopping. And I would say here within the US, we're very, very guilty. We're always looking for best price. It's kind of the bargain, it's the value. And so when you don't know and there's no way to be very distinctly different, then what they end up looking at is it's always like, is this going to be worth it from a price perspective? So you become a commodity, okay? And commodities compete on cost. So research shows, if you can think about this, that unclear positioning can cause up to 65% of your prospects, your potential clients, to walk away, and most likely because they're confused, okay? Not because they didn't, not because they didn't like what you did, but they just in simple didn't get it. So here's going to be something, and this there's a couple numbers, so just listen and be patient as I give you a couple numbers, because depending on the entrepreneur, depending on the business, these numbers vary greatly. As an example, if you're in part of the e-commerce world and you're selling products, a lot of people will sell things 50, 100. A couple of the companies we've worked with sell products upwards, by the way, of $20,000 to $40,000. You might say you have a couple $100 of products, okay? But if that's the case, and we're talking 65% of your customers leave confused because the message is not as clear as it needs to be, out of $1,000, in essence, you're leaving $650 on the table. Well, let's just up the ante. Let's say that customer on average is $10,000. Well, that means, and that might be over their lifetime. It might not just be at purchase one, because often once a customer buys, hopefully you can keep them buying again and increase that lifetime value, or what people refer to as LTV. But again, let's say that customer's worth $10,000. And if we then have the statistics that state that when people are confused, they're less likely to buy, 65% of that is $6,500. Now, again, I've worked with businesses that have clients that are valued up to multiple years, and not just 50,000 or 100,000, but potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. So as an example, $100,000 client over a lifetime, you could say you potentially have lost out on $65,000 of business. Now, again, it's not that that's once you have the customer. This all happens before you ever get these clients. Okay. And so this is a pre-process, and that's the implication of what can happen. So take 20 prospects a month. Let's say that can be, long story short, if it's 10,000, and let's say we can do 20 clients, would be 200,000, and 65% of that's going to be about $130,000 lost as part of the potential that was on the table that we ended up leaving off the table because your DNA isn't complete.
That's a huge number, Nathan. And I'm just thinking about this number being so huge, and that's just from confused people. It's not even counting the operational costs or the bottlenecks or all the other costs. So,
Yeah,
wow.
you're right. I mean, that's exactly it. It's a hidden cost, again, that most people miss. They don't even understand that exists. So when your team can't articulate the value, every important conversation, if you think about it, if it needs you, every sales call, and depending on how much you have to be involved, every partnership discussion, every potential proposal, again, all those, what's happening is you're not able to scale these things. And it's because you're ending up having to work harder. And again, those different key pieces, that value ends up getting left on the table, or it walks out the door with what might have been your potential client or customer. And I'll just add one more thing here, Mushka, before you kind of bring something else up with this. If you can think about this simple part of clarifying this strand on your DNA is also what helps increase close rates. And that's a term depending on how you sell your services or your business or your products. Sometimes it's on a phone call. Sometimes it's just on a site. Sometimes that's in part of a group conversation. The bigger the ticket, usually the more people that are involved with a business that you're trying to work with. And what we just find out is that you just end up closing much less of your existing opportunities than you could have. So let's say you had 10 meetings. Are you closing 2 of those? Are we closing 3? or are you closing 6 or 7? And some people might say that's not possible. Mushka, you're a lot more likely to get to those numbers when you understand with complete clarity this first strand of your DNA and part of the messaging. And it goes past this, right? We're going to talk on a couple other podcasts about the second strand of DNA, which is who your 1.5% best buyers are. But often, again, I've said across from every single, like literally every single business. In fact, the business that I took to 30 million as I began to implement this, I finally understood that I was learning something that made companies great. And I keep on looking at how many companies just don't know this. And it's amazing. Like I said, over 90% of the companies do a great job, but this is one piece that nobody has spent time in order to hone in on. So, well, that was a
So,
long
so,
explanation about this. So go ahead. Sorry.
so let me make sure I understand the DNA piece. You're saying that clarity, the positioning, is like a genetic code for the business, right?
Yeah, and I love this. Let me just give you an example on this. It's an analogy. I think that I hopefully can help you make this click. Imagine, and we probably have all seen this, or you've done one. Somebody hands you 1,000-piece puzzle. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
here's this amazing puzzle. But by the way, it's just the box. There's no box top, so you don't have a picture. Okay, so there's no picture to work off. It's just a pile of pieces. Mushka, what do you do?
I don't know, start by the edges, I guess, sort by color.
Yeah, right. I think that's what we'd all do. It's like what seems easiest. Oh, think about the edges. We know flat pieces.
Yeah.
This is what I've done. Start to sort, right? We start to sort. You're right. We start to look at the edges. We start to look at the color, and we start to make some progress. But here's the thing: is you're never quite sure what you're building. If it's the right thing, you're simply moving pieces around, right? Hoping that the right pieces click together. And that's what most business owners are doing with their positioning. Just they've got the pieces, they've got the product, they got the team, they have value that they have delivered. All right. But nobody has given them what I like to call the box top. So nobody showed them, nobody gave them the picture on what the complete picture actually looks like. So they're simply moving and putting pieces together based on what they think and feel they best are. So
Mhm.
the clarity DNA is the box top. So think about that. Puzzle without a box top. You're trying to work through things. Again, a lot of businesses can start to put those together, groups of color. However, when you have complete clarity, okay, so the clarity DNA, you end up getting that box top. And not only do we know colors and associations, we start to know locations. And it makes
Mm.
it a lot easier because we can start to look at the lines because we know what we're building towards. And so, right, so is the picture now, it's the thing that shows everyone, your team, your customers, what you're building and how these pieces fit together. Without it, again, you're just simply guessing. And guess what? So is everybody else.
So, what I understand is when you buy a business or when you build your own business, the box top never got created. The box top just stays missing.
Yeah. And some people might think they have the box top. So, to your point exactly, the previous owner, they had clarity. The business was working well. They could close the deals with a handshake legitimately, or literally, that might be all it took. They knew exactly which customers were going to be their golden or the ideal customers, which ones were going to be trouble. They had and they knew in their mind what that positioning was. They just never most likely wrote that down. And again, even if things have been written down, what I have found is that once somebody's acquired a business within their first 6 to 18 months, we find that they thought that they were on this great trajectory. Things just seem to not work the right way. And it's because not everything was actually documented. The nuances and the instinct of what that owner was, or even key team members on that team that they had, if they're no longer there, the box top kind of has been lifted and it's been removed. So you've ended up with the pieces and the parts, but it's no longer there. So that's just because it often was never written down because they didn't need to. It was obvious. I know that even in this business, as we've continued to drive, a lot of the people will tell me the same thing. And a lot of that is how do we get that puzzle out of my mind? And how do we get that out of our team members' minds? And then how do we help our clients get that out of their minds, right?
Yeah.
So that it's not just obvious to them, it's obvious to the rest of their team. So the clarity was decoded in their head, and when they handed you the keys to the business that you acquired or a business you've now been trying to work or build on for a period of time, the code didn't transfer. So you inherited the business, which everything looked complete and nice, but the positioning, that key clarity on the DNA, the genetic code that actually made it work best walked out the door when they walked out
Hmm.
the door.
So, how do you fix it? Like, how do you complete someone's clarity DNA or the first strand of their DNA?
How do you complete this? I'll just share a couple of some things. It's not by working harder on marketing. Okay, that's not
Oh.
it. By the way, it's not because that you need to hire better team members in positions. It's not better copywriting. It's not doing potentially part of a rebrand, which happens is like maybe our brand needs to be refreshed because I feel like I now have this new baby that I want to put in my own clothes, right? That's not it. So you fix it by going to the source. And so again, we call this part of the clarity system, and it has 3 parts.
Walk us through it, please.
Okay, part 1, fixing what already is working. Mushka, you and I know that when we've gone to businesses, a lot of people think you got to reinvent the positioning. We actually just want to find the positioning that's actually hiding in some of their best results. So that's part 1, is just find out what's already working and what's already hiding behind what already is providing best results. Number 2 is we like to call this your 360 position. So your best position. And this thing is the thing that you can do, okay, that nobody else can quite do the same way. And when you do, it actually makes your competition irrelevant. And I'm going to come back to that. It's what you do so uniquely well. Again, not what others can do, what you do so uniquely well that it makes your competition irrelevant or your products and other competitors' products irrelevant, if that makes sense. Part 3 is to align part of, again, what you've already found that you do well, part of what it is that you do so differently. And we want to align that with how you're offering that to your potential customers and clients. So everything that you sell, every service you provide now is clearly delivering on that position. So when these 3 pieces are in place, again, the message mayhem disappears. Everyone tells the same story, and you stop ending up being the person that kind of needs to be brought into those, and you stop being the bottleneck.
Okay, so let's go through each one. What's part 1, and how does it look like?
With our businesses, when we start Mushka, we talk about part 1 being part of Compass 360. And this is where a lot of other consistencies start looking. They think, is it what's broken? And they're going to start somewhere else. So we start with what's already working. So a lot of people think about, hey, what's broken and what's not working in your business. If you go out there and you go hire somebody, you're going to try to fix what maybe is broken. And we don't. We start with what's already working, because here's the thing. If you already have pieces, you already got great positioning, and it's just scattered, right? A little inconsistent. Then what we can do with Compass 360, it's about finding those key pieces and being able to bring those together with some clarity.
So how is it different from a branding agency?
Good question. A lot of people ask, so you just do marketing? I'm like, well, no. Most businesses, when they want better positioning, they really start from scratch. They hire often a brand agency. They might go hire just a marketing group. They look at doing brainstorming sessions. They try to invent what I want to say differentiation, and it feels productive. You can look at getting some nice pieces together. Maybe it's updating landing pages. Maybe it's you're getting the marketing team to bring together some strategies on what you think you're going to share. And the challenge is, again, with part of this is it feels like it ends up being new, like a new message, a new tagline. And the challenge, again, those things, ideally, they're just not going to really stick. And it's because it's not connecting with what you've actually done already as a company that's true to your business. And so here's what works better instead. So you take a look, and this is going to be random for your company, but your top 10 customers, let's just take an example. The ones who love you, not just like you, but love you. They love paying full price. And in fact, they actually are looking for ways to spend more with you in your business. And the ones that like to and are excited about legitimately, they're just going to stay with you forever. Okay. And these are the groups also that are probably your best advocates and refer other people. And what we can ask, and we can start to find out, is what do they have in common? What made them choose you? You'd say, what made them choose us? And what are they saying about you when you're not in the room? And we do part of a test that we can call like a bar stool, but it's the same thing of what somebody honestly is going to say. So that's an ideal thing. That's what we look at. Your 10 best customers. We refer to this in the second strand as your 1.5% of your customers that create literally 60% of your revenue. And we get to know them more personally. And so those answers to those questions is what gives us the clarity on where you're currently at in your positioning. And it's one of the key things that often most businesses haven't extracted.
So it's like you're not creating something new, rather you're uncovering something that's already there.
Yeah, you're exactly right on. So your best positioning isn't something that you invent. It's not necessarily something you discover. As part of this Compass 360, we do 4 things to help really identify this. So again, we talked about utilizing what we call we refer to this as your top 10 50s. And there's a series of questions we can ask your best customers. And when we do, we can get your top and your worst customers so we can know the divergency on this. We start to find the patterns that show up, what makes someone a perfect fit versus what makes somebody a drain on your resources. The second thing is we look at auditing the current message. So what you're saying on the website, in sales calls, different type of proposals or ways that you're presenting your service or your products. And more importantly, we're looking to see how consistently might this be the same. And the third thing is we're looking for hidden revenue opportunities. And this is an interesting one because almost always there's literally 50 to 100 to $250,000 sitting in any business right now that they're not seeing. And part of this is because it's a combo of the wrong pricing, wrong messaging, and their untapped conversations with the customer segments that they already have on offers that should exist but don't. And again, this is, if you think about this, not reinventing, to your point, coming back to what already has worked the best, honing in on that, and then finding how there's already opportunities within those existing groups to what we like to talk about, mine a little bit more. So one of the four things is we help identify what we like to talk about is the core strengths of the company. So what are the things that have been shown from these clients that we can grab a hold of? So what's the evidence so that we're not just assuming on the strengths that you guys have as a team, and not what you think you're good at, but this is what we wanted to find, Mushka, of what you are actually good at based on the things that have created wins in the past.
That sounds like a lot of insight just from a diagnostic phase, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this can sound more complicated than it is. The biggest thing that I would like to share is that, you know, by the end of something like this, the Compass 360, you get to know exactly what's working. You understand what's broken. You also understand what some of the quick wins are that have been hiding in plain sight. But knowing what's not working also, but by knowing what is working on its own is not necessarily always just enough, because you need to turn those insights again and convert that back into the communications, into the conversations, to specifics and ways that help, again, your business be so uniquely defined that your competitors become irrelevant. And sorry, go
Right,
ahead.
right. Is this the position 360 piece that you mentioned once?
It is. You're right. I guess part of what this does is, as we begin to look at the end of Compass, our goal is to start to bring those things together. And it leads us into the second part, which is part two, is part of our position 360. So this is where we define what you can consider your 360 position. And so the first is getting to understand who you are. And the second thing we build on is ideally what makes you so different and unique than others. And then I'm going to say cut. We're going to come back to this, and we're going to go back to
It's
Compass
11:30. I needed to meet Eric. I just didn't realize.
Okay, cut. We're going to come back to cut.
Yeah, I'm just
I'll
going
just read
to.
through this here quickly. So 1, 2, 3. By the end of Compass 360, you know exactly what's working, what's broken, and when the quick wins, where the quick wins are hiding. So by knowing what's working necessarily isn't enough. You need to turn those insights into a position that's clear and so specific that the competition becomes irrelevant. And that actually is what leads us into part two. And so part two is what we call position 360, Mushka.
Yes.
And so this is the part that often a lot of businesses also don't take a look at. This is where we define what your 360 position is. If you've ever heard of something like a blue ocean or unique positioning, this is where you get to know, instead of competing in a space where all your competitors are, this is where you can go find something, a new place, a new piece to communicate things differently. So you're not fighting over the same customers, and you can create a clear, unique place. And so we call that 360 positioning that allows you to become the only option for your customers and clients. And this sounds great in theory, but how to actually do that can be a little bit tricky sometimes.
All right then. Let's pause it here and let's come back to it.